Well, in this presentation, I will show why Naples organized sponsored media industries serve as a vehicle for exploitative processes of political patronage among the local poor, and how this relates to populist dynamic of political radicalization in today's Italy and beyond, as we will see, especially among the youth, a term which I define, perhaps from a bit too much Eurocentric perspective, as the section of society comprehending subjects under the 25 years of age. Reflecting on this topic from an ethnographic epistemological standpoint is relevant, at least in my opinion, to current debates in political anthropology, qualitative criminology, critical media studies, and neo-Marxian social theory, which are the main fields of knowledge on which my research concretely relies. And that's pretty much for two main reasons. Firstly, the notion of exploitative networking nicely illustrates the processes through which mafia-like organizations expand their youngest clientele within the social peripheries of neoliberal democracies as a whole, while extracting profits out of them, as well as their capacity to influence state power by intermediating the economic and political interests of multiple classes of people at once. Secondly, the recent electoral affirmations of populist parties in Italy and worldwide share a very important common characteristic. They all were supported by an intense mediatization of politics, often relying on networking processes co-involving populist institutional operators and young social media users of lower class backgrounds. As I will show, these processes and the form of structural violence they elicit tend to be exploitative in nature, resembling those permeating the organized crime-managed mediascapes of Naples. Given that, Ernesto Laclau defined populism as a mode of political communication through which diverse subaltern voices performatively engage with the public sphere as the collective social body, due to their more or less supposed common antagonism against other social formations, such as minorities or the so-called establishment, whom they interpret as external to the people itself. This definition well illustrates the attitude of Italian and international populist parties toward the so-called res publica, and yet it fails to fully explain how upper-class conservative leaders like Giorgia Meloni, Donald Trump, and Elon Musk, in tandem with the bosses of the Napolitan Camorra, may appropriate populist discourses to advance their own agendas. By mapping the clientelist processes through which legal and illegal upper-class political subjects engage with the poor, in populist terms, via the media, my research responds to this gap, redefining current alt-right populism as an exploitative tool of interclass relationality and, more importantly, neoliberal governmentality. Naples and its mediascape are particularly fertile ethnographic grounds to explore the interconnections between neoliberal media politics, gangsterism, and populist dynamics of radicalization among the contemporary lower-class youth. Naples, in fact, is the most populous city in southern Italy, but it has also the highest unemployment rates in the country, particularly among those who are under 24 years old. Naples also shows one of the highest organized crime rates in the entire EU, especially concerning so-called baby gangs and increasing support for far-right parties during the last 20 years. And perhaps also due to that, the city features increasing rates of hate crimes versus gender or racial minorities within the same period. This data reflects Naples' social history and the role played by gangs in its political economic life. The former capital of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, Naples suffered an endemic condition of economic decline since 1861, when the Kingdom of Piedmont conquered the south of the peninsula, rebranding itself as the Kingdom, and after the Second World War, the Republic of Italy. This ongoing decline, which Gramsci famously labeled as the Italian Sovereign Question, is grounded in the unequal forms of public intervention through which the post-unitarian Italian state has constantly promoted conditions of privilege among the industrialized north of the country versus the south. In this historical context, groups of Napolitan smugglers and racketeers, the so-called Camorra, managed illegal form of wealth redistribution and service in exchange for bribes. Camorra in Napolitan language means bribe, filling the void left by public administrations. Since then, the Camorra faced ongoing processes of capitalist modernization, turning into a very structured criminal cartel. As such, it expanded its capacity to permeate local political economies and serve as a violent point of reference for the Napolitan poor, through the provision of exploitative financial loans, private services, and informal jobs. At once, it also improved its capacity to infiltrate local and national public offices via strategic alliances with various conservative parties and the mobilization of the lower class voters in their favor. Starting in the 90s, the Camorra also recognized that investing in Napolitan media could strengthen its ability to elicit consent among local lower-class youth, who are its primary source of labor force. Every Camorra gang I encountered or even heard about during my ethnography managed or indirectly controlled at least a media outlet, including local TV and radio stations, websites, houses of music production, and concert agencies. These outlets allow the Camorra to circulate self-legitimizing populist discourses among their young audiences, which illustrate the supposedly common sociocultural identities of the Napolitan gangsters and the local poor, in function of their, rather imagined, shared antagonism against state power and any other further symbolic enemy of the cartel. Camorra managed media outlets also allow their owners and sponsors to expand their webs of patronage with many members of their youngest audiences, through the high-priced provision of careers in the local media and opportunities to become local celebrities in the field of neomelodic media production. These are Camorra-sponsored cinematographic, televisual, and music productions aiming to represent the daily experience of the Napolitan poor in ethno-nationalistic terms, with a preference for those engaging with organized crime, such as drug dealers, killers, convicts, and their relatives. Through the financial management of the neomelodic media industries and the form of stardom that they entail among local young people, the Camorra regulates the potential access of the latter to self-exploitative processes of economic mobility, which in turn rely on their free willingness to participate in populist form of media representation and, of course, to pay fat bribes to the gangs to do so. This exploitative approach to populist media politics, however, has not been implemented by criminal gangs only in recent Italian history, being grounded in state-regulated dynamics of neoliberal media management that can be traced back to the 90s. Before the decade, Italian televisions were managed by the RAI, a public company with declared educational intentions, and Mediaset, a private corporation owned by right-wing media tycoon Silvio Berlusconi, which specialized in TV entertainment. After Berlusconi was elected prime minister in 1994, this equilibrium was compromised. On top of implementing neoliberal reforms that promoted precarious labor and reduced the degrees of public services available to the poor, Berlusconi's government and its successor of any political stripes, to be honest, including the leftist side, established compulsory control on public television. Most educational TV formats got replaced with reality show and infotainment. These new formats alternated light media entertainment with tragic real-life stories by selected members of their audiences, which these TV shows try to privately resolve versus largely depleted systems of public service provision. At once, they regularly featured populist representations of society, being denoted by explicit sexism and ethnocentric rhetorics, defining implicitly what types of lower-class people were worthy to go on TV, therefore accessing informal dynamics of service provision via the media versus any other subaltern group. In short, Italian public media turned into informal providers of private services and populist privilege, aiming to legitimize neoliberal modalities of governmentality and alt-right interpretations of what constituted the Italian people versus what was to be considered external to it. As argued by Noël Mollet, this engendered populist form of mediocratic political subjectivity amid most lower-class audiences. Following the 90s, the emancipation of the Italian subaltern no longer depended on renegotiations of the social contract versus state power, but on the entrepreneurial capacity to publicly embrace the populist imaginaries circulated by the media and establish patronage relations with their sponsors, managers, and operators, often based on processes of economic bribing and political collusion. To explore these dynamics, I conducted an ethnography for about 20 months within various Camorra-managed and state-regulated Napolitan media contexts, like local and national TV and radio stations, neomelodic houses of music productions, and digital outlets. Most of the illicit media outlets in which I conducted my ethnography were based in lower class areas and were extremely popular among the local youth. Subsequently, I also conducted ethnography at the headquarters of a major national public TV network based in Rome, whose shows were equally popular among the lower class young Neapolitans. As such, I interviewed about 40 Napolitan people of various genders and social positionalities, whom I recruited among the sponsors, performers, and young audiences of Camorra managed media outlets, as well as further 15 people serving as managers, operators, and young audiences of state-regulated media. I also conducted intense participant observation of this media context, working as a car driver for a Camorra-sponsored melodic singer, as well as a comedian and a TV show anchorman at a Camorra-managed TV channel, as you can see in the picture. Given that, I would now like to share some of the ethnographic experiences from which I've inferred my insight. Close by the place where I used to live in Naples, for example, I once met Ernesto, a tailor owner. Ernesto had spotted me interviewing people in the area surrounding the shop, and as such, he exchanged me with the journalist. And he took the habit to approach me every day, asking to be invited to my suppository show to talk about his personal case. The tailor was involved in a fierce dispute against the Camorra. Unlike most other local shop owners, he refused to pay the monthly racket fee requested by local gangsters to protect his trade. Accordingly, the cartel regularly sent groups of violent teenagers to visit his shop, threatening him, beating him up, and robbing his skinny profit. Despite that, the tailor thought that reporting these attacks to the police was a monumental waste of time, as the cops were too much scared and underfunded to challenge the Camorra effectively. He was instead convinced that only the indignant public opinion of the national media audience could have pressured the state authorities to intervene. Ernesto even tried to offer me money to bribe me into helping him to go on my supposed TV show and make his case famous. When the tailor finally realized my true profession, I asked him why he had not submitted his request to a real TV network through official channels. He replied, as you can read in the slide, he says, "Nobody goes on national TV by official means. As a man of the people, I can only hope to cultivate connections with the elites in charge of the media and their employees. If your story sounds like a true Italian story and you offer something to the right people, then you may really have a chance to go on TV, have your 15 minutes of fame, and perhaps mobilize the public institutions in your favor." In short, Ernesto believed that the Napolitan man of the people could negotiate improved life conditions with neoliberal state power only via self-exploitative activities of networking with the media elites and their operators, who could turn his needs for public security into private forms of populist entertainment in exchange for money, dinero. Ernesto's claim might seem eccentric, but they were consistent with the data I subsequently collected at the headquarters of a public TV network. There, for example, I interviewed a Napolitan production manager involved in infotainment TV shows that invited people like Ernesto to voice their problems on camera, turning their discontent into spectacle. On that occasion, I asked him how the guests of his shows were selected, and he answered, "I then received tons of emails from desperate people asking me to talk about their problems on TV. However, most of my TV show's participants get selected depending on the informal calls that the casting director received from politicians and businessmen who want to appeal to contextual slides of the electoral commercial pies versus each other." Several other people I met in Naples, including many young melodic fans, shared Ernesto's attitude toward media politics. Since Ernesto wanted to resolve his problem via technical means, for example, I interviewed other local shop owners and their often young workers to assess how they relate to Camorra-sponsored media. It emerged that most of them shared ties with equally young singers and local TV celebrities, to whom they requested to serve as well-paid mediators for obtaining favor and services from the Camorra. When I finally managed to meet these performers, they described the local media as Camorra-owned platforms of socio-economic mobility, improving their precarious life conditions and allowing them to be the authentic voice of the Napolitan people, versus the polluting circulation of non-Napolitan values such as loyalty towards state power and inclusivity toward gender and racial minorities. I further confirmed these claims when a 22-year-old neomelodic singer invited me to a TV show where he performed. The show involved a dozen young male singers performing in front of a group of local young lower-class girls. The show director instructed the girls to approach the singer on stage and engage with them in overtly sexualized behavior to show, I'm quoting, how authentic Napolitan women of the people act on TV. While complying, however, the girls kept their eyes fixed on cameras rather than the singers with whom they shared intimacies on stage. When I inquired about this behavior, they explained to me that they did so to increase their appeal to the audience and therefore their chances to be invited back for future performances, ideally as paid neomelodic showgirls. Another camera framed a TV presenter commenting on the singer's performances. He dressed like in a gangster movie, black suit and tie, white shirt, sunglasses, and a matching fedora hat. When I asked him why did he dress like the cosplay of a Martin Scorsese character, he replied that the TV management required him to do so to promote supposedly authentic Napolitan values. Even the singers strive for mobility via populist self-representation. Surrounded by women, they staged a gender representation of success. However, this success was inherently self-explanatory and fake, as the TV management demanded a flat racket fee for each opportunity that they had to appear on their shows. Nevertheless, these artists' participation in local TV was essential for advancing their career in the local concert industry and marketing their public image in tandem with the social mobility, in tandem with the role of mediation they played between their fans and Camorra gangs. In sum, the social mobility of the neomelodic performers and audiences hinged on their common ability to publicly embody populist representation of their social selves through the financial mediation of upper-class patrons. These case studies, to conclude, show that organized crime and neoliberal state power rely on similar relational dynamics of media production to enact comparable populist forms of hegemony on their lower-class audiences. They do so via free mirroring dynamics of media governmentality, combining neoliberal and populist elements. First, they circulate media representation of their lower-class audiences, portraying their identities as reflections of populist narratives. Secondly, they condition these audiences' potentiality to achieve economic mobility on their voluntary participation in populist media representation. Third, they made this participation dependent on their entrepreneurial capacity to engage in self-exploitative networking with upper-class patrons, bribing their way into populist privilege. Considering this, actual Italian populism does not engender any crisis whatsoever of the hegemony exercised by the neoliberal upper classes on the poor. This hegemony is reproduced by the relational processes through which legal and illegal political institutions cooperate in overlapping dynamics of both neoliberal and the populist governmentality. These dynamics alienate the diverse components of the lower classes, including the youngest members, from partaking in shared contra-hegemonic forms of class consciousness versus legal and criminal social elites alike. As such, the current Italian state and the Camorra indirectly support each other in their old or their ongoing reproduction of the hegemonic and the subaltern, cooperating in populist imaginaries and neoliberal modes of civic engagement. These insights, concluding for real, have inspired my current postdoctoral project. My late research extends my previous ethnography to the dynamic of online social mediation, reproducing organized crime and right-wing populism in Italy and overall Southern Europe. This goal is motivated by two trends I observed through the preliminary fieldwork I conducted in Naples last summer. Firstly, Camorra-sponsored culture operators, including neomelodic celebrities, increasingly employ online social media to extend the form of governmentality I thus far described beyond Naples, involving larger sectors of the Italian and international lower-class youth. Secondly, current Italian and global politics are increasingly influenced by the involvement of populist activists in similar processes of digital mediation vis-à-vis their younger followers. In the last year, Southern European populist leaders like Giorgia Meloni and Santiago Abascal elicited exponential consent from the Italian and Spanish lower-class youth via intense social media campaigns. These political figures and most organized crime-sponsored digital operators employ the same social media to engage with the same audiences via mirroring imaginaries and mirroring informal modalities of civic participation. Accordingly, I plan to conduct further ethnography in Naples, Barcelona, and Madrid to explore the relational lives of organized crime-sponsored online influencers and digitally active populist activists, evaluating their accounts in terms of structural violence and neoliberal governmentality vis-à-vis their audiences. Hopefully, we will have further occasion to discuss the new insights emerging from my research during the next month. Meanwhile, I thank you again for your attention and any feedback you would like to share with me during the upcoming Q&A session. Grazie a tutti di cuore.